Hey everyone, Brian here with DIY Outdoor Life. Today we're going to be talking about using lithium batteries on campers. The equipment and the gear is getting better than ever. It's improving every day and the price has plummeted. Now, one of my favorite parts about this is that the charging gear and monitoring gear, it's becoming more DIY friendly. You don't have to have a lot of skills to make this swap. So it's a very exciting time. I hope to be able to discuss the basics here for beginners. Whether you already own one of these batteries or not, I want to help you understand it more. So a lot of cool stuff to discuss today, but you'll have to forgive me because we're going to start off with a rant. Okay, so here's the rant. One of the most annoying things for me as a content creator was becoming branded as an anti-lithium guy. I've been working with lithium batteries for a very, very long time. I build them from scratch. I've done it as a hobby and I've done it as a business. I might not be a leading expert in this field. I meet people who know more than me every day, but I do have a lot of experience with these batteries and I'm a bit of a fanatic. Lithium iron phosphate is almost the only chemistry I use for my off-grid builds. Now, the reason I have this reputation of the opposite, and I still get emails from people that say, I know you hate lithium batteries, but, is because about 3 years ago, I made a video pushing back against irresponsible lithium battery marketing. Coming from my experience with using these batteries, I was dumbfounded with the amount of misinformation and things that people were saying. So I thought the most responsible thing I could do for the community is push back. I wanted to talk about quality, safety, the true cost of ownership. You know, a Battleborn at the time cost $1,000, and if you didn't have the DIY skills to upgrade your converter or consider going with a DC to DC charge controller, things were a lot more expensive than that. So I made a cost-based argument. That video was more popular than most of the videos that I've made, so I got that reputation. So we use a battery as an essential component on our camper. Now it's there, it helps certain things run, but when we don't have connection to utility or a generator, we run on battery. And we're subject to how much charge we can get into it and how much charge we can get out of it. But if you're into dry camping or boondocking, a battery is a super important part of the whole system that allows us to get outdoors. Now, lithium batteries are distinctively different than lead acid batteries, and they have different qualities, both advantages and disadvantages. And if we understand these things, we can get better results. So we're going to talk about the advantages in 3 ways: energy density, internal resistance, and life expectancy, or resilience to being charged and discharged. These are pretty big advantages, and I'm going to try to move through these so you can understand why this is such a big leap forward for our off-grid camping. So energy density. If you were to imagine that I put a lithium iron phosphate battery on the table, 100 amp hours, and a lead acid battery, whether it's gel, AGM, flooded, 100 amp hours, both 100 amp hours, they're about the same size, but the lithium battery weighs half as much. So it's storing energy with lighter components. It's a more energy dense device. That can come in handy. But if you take a deeper look at this, it actually gets a lot better. See, you can use the whole capacity of a lithium battery from 100% to 0%. And you can do that thousands and thousands of times without having measurable depreciation on the battery cells. It can hold up to that. Now, it's also important here that we realize that we need a lithium battery charger. If a lithium battery depletes all the way, it goes to sleep. And a lithium charger knows that and can wake it back up. A lead acid battery charger doesn't do that. So you need to do this redneck thing with jumper cables where you shock the battery to wake it back up. So it's another case here for why you want to get the whole ecosystem, the charging and all the gear right for these batteries. But the ability to use all of that, practically let's use 80% or 90% so we're not putting the battery to sleep. This is a huge advantage. Now, if you look at the lead acid battery, it's a lot more complicated than that. You might have heard that you can only use 50% of it, and that's not true, but it's a useful thing to believe. I'll try to explain what I mean by that. You see, with a lead acid battery, how deep you discharge it, forget that it's called a deep cycle. If you keep those cycles shallow, the battery lasts a very long time. And that's what we've done with off-grid cabins for decades. You can oversize your battery, make sure it stays at the top side of the cycle, and that battery will last over 10 years. It's an incredible value. We've raked this through the coals with the lithium battery marketing to make it sound worse than it is. Lead acid batteries are excellent, excellent batteries. We just might be able to get more out of the lithium chemistry. So if you keep those cycles shallow by oversizing the battery, it's cheaper to buy a bigger battery than to continue to replace an undersized battery. We keep it on that trickle charger, that battery tender, whether we have a boat or an RV, it stays plugged in as much as possible. You need some amount of solar. Even if it's cheap solar, we replace the capacity as we use it and keep the cycle shallow. Now you have a cheap battery that works well and lasts a long time. There are a few issues trying to do this with an RV though, right? Inevitably the cycles get deeper. Whether we're on longer boondocking trips or it gets hot and our refrigerator is running a lot or we're having trouble keeping up with solar, the cycles will become deeper on that battery and your life expectancy might then more realistically drop to 5-6 years. As long as you stop from going below like 12.1 volts, that's where we look at like the 50% mark, then the damage becomes more exponential. You can kill a battery in a single year, a lead acid battery, if your depth of discharge is too deep. This is what people are complaining about. It's really user error and nothing to do with the battery, but I understand why this can become such a problem with lead acid batteries and why some people go through them so quickly. So two things should come from this discussion. One, lead acid batteries aren't bad, you just have to use them a specific way. But looking at the proper way to use them reveals how the lithium battery could have a much better user experience. You don't have to worry about that depth of discharge. Stay within 90%. If you have a lithium battery charger, every once in a while, if you run it down too much, the charger will wake it back up, whether it's solar or a wall charger for lithium. But there is a bigger issue here, the second one. It plays back into that energy density. You can get the useful runtime at half the size of the lithium battery, or even less. So now you're looking at half the size and a quarter of the weight. This is a big difference in energy density, but enough on this topic. Let's move to the next one. We could really go down the rabbit hole when we're talking about the internal resistance of these batteries with ohms and Puchert effect and different things. We don't have to do that. This is how I want you to understand this. A lithium battery has lower resistance by nature. Lead acid battery has higher. The charge goes in and the discharge goes out of a lithium battery with less resistance, less waste. It runs more efficiently. These numbers will show up big time with larger battery banks. At the smaller scale, it's not that big a difference, but there's some other qualities here. You can charge a lithium battery faster, but it's important to weed through some of this marketing. It doesn't charge itself. So I've heard people say, well, I bought a lithium battery because it charges in an hour. And you say, do you have a 100-amp charger? No, I just thought that it charged faster. If you have a 20-amp charger, it's going to take 5 hours to be able to charge a 100-amp-hour battery. The trick here is that it's capable of taking a bigger charge. So if you want to get real advanced with your solar or you get an inverter charger, there's lots of gear here that can charge the lithium battery faster than the lead acid battery. That's great. But there's another related quality that most users really like. The lithium battery starts at a higher voltage and it maintains that voltage as you're discharging it, and then it drops off steeply at the end. The lead acid battery starts at a lower voltage and it immediately starts to go down. So you can take an 80% discharged lithium battery and it's at a higher voltage than a brand new fully charged lead acid battery. So all of your appliances like that better. It's just nicer to have that higher stable voltage. It's like working with a DC regulator or a converter on your camper. It's always sitting up over 13 volts. It's a really nice feature. Enough out of resistance. Let's move on to the last one. So this last topic I'd like to brand as life expectancy. This is the big advantage of these lithium iron phosphate batteries. But I do have to kind of reorient how most people think of this, because most of what you hear is about life cycles, and in my opinion, that's all nonsense. The experts agree that you'll get 10 to 15 years out of a lithium iron phosphate battery in your RV. That application is important. If you barely go camping a few times a year and you go to campgrounds, yours might last longer. If you own a Jeep or a Bronco or something and you're shaking your camper all around, yours might be on the the lower side of the life expectancy. That means in a carefree way, even using deeper discharges, we can get that battery to last a lot longer than a lead acid battery, and it will save you money and be one less thing you have to worry about. That's all you really have to understand. But what you're gonna hear from everyone else, and I'm gonna have to spend a little time here now to try to put this idea to sleep, is all of this discussion of life cycles. And every time I hear someone talking about it, they're usually mischaracterizing it and saying a bunch of stuff that's not true. If you were to crack a lithium battery open, there'd be a bunch of different cells in there. Some have prismatic cells, some have cylindrical cells, some have flat cells, but they're linked together with a battery monitoring system, and they have a couple different components, little auto reset relays and safety features that comprise a whole battery. This is what people are talking about. If in the lab you remove one cell and hook it to a machine that charges it and discharges it, they call it a 1C rate. You're discharging the battery in an hour and charging it back up. Something miraculous happens. You find out that lithium iron phosphate battery cells can be discharged quickly, thousands and thousands of times, 3, 4, 5,000 times, and it's still useful. It's incredible. This is a really cool thing about a lithium battery cell, lithium iron phosphate battery cell. But they are taking a square peg from that lab and trying to jam it in a round hole for our camping application to sell batteries. Because here's the truth, it doesn't matter at all. When we go to camp, we don't put a 100 amp load on the battery, kill it in an hour. What would we do for the other 23 hours of the day with our dead battery? We deliberately try to do the opposite of that lab test. We try to keep our battery charged. We're efficient. We try to make it last for days. So the cells are coming down very slowly. If you were to try to replicate that in a lab, it would take 20 years. So what we know is that when you discharge the cells that way, the numbers go through the roof. 10, 15, 18,000 cycles. So guess what? You're never gonna go camping 15,000 times. I wish you did, I wish I did, but it's a completely ridiculous number. So what we can effectively say in the way that we use the battery is that we'll never fatigue the cells. So don't worry about it. The BMS is what goes bad. Some of the connections, or there's like a breaker or a fuse, you could think of it either way, that goes bad on these batteries. And then after 10 or 15 years, it's consumable electronics. It's gonna be cheaper to buy a new battery than to have somebody fix that. My only hope here is that good businesses pop up that recycle those batteries, because you can match those cells back up and sell a refurbished battery. But I do not want people to, I'm sorry I'm ranting again, but I hear people say only charge to 80% on a new moon, and on Wednesdays don't use the battery because you can get 10% more life cycles out of it. Great. The cells themselves will be good for 19,000 cycles and you'll go camping 200 times in your life. It doesn't matter. So it's a huge advantage, but you're being bombarded with nonsense. So I could have saved you guys 10, 15 minutes of your life if I said lithium batteries are better, lighter, easier to use, and they last longer. But I wanted to take the time to dispel some of these half-truths or kind of misappropriations of data and hopefully help you guys understand the advantages. But I do want to cover the disadvantages as well. It won't take as long because understanding them will definitely give you better results. So when you hear about the disadvantages of lithium batteries, you almost always hear about thermal runaway or that they set on fire. It's important for you as a user to understand there's a lot of different lithium ion batteries. Some people erroneously say there's lithium ion and lithium iron phosphate. They're all lithium ion batteries. They use lithium as a cathode and they use graphite as an anode, and they're all very similar, but there's some important characteristic differences. Lithium iron phosphate, LiFePO4, is what we use in campers, and it's extraordinarily safe. All of the thermal runaways and the fires that you're hearing about are other lithium ion batteries like lithium NMC batteries. So these batteries are safer, arguably safer than lead acid batteries, and people store them inside under their bed. This is a very safe battery chemistry. So this isn't really a disadvantage. It's kind of what some people think is a disadvantage, and it's really not. The real disadvantage of all lithium ion batteries is that if you try to charge that cell below freezing, you ruin it. It causes lithium plating, it shorts out. It's like feeding one of those gizmos after midnight.
And probably the most important thing, don't ever feed him after midnight.
You don't want to cold weather charge a lithium battery cell. But here's the upside. The industry has solved this problem. It's just up to me and you as a consumer to choose the right gear. They sell lithium iron phosphate batteries with cold temperature protection. I want everyone to stick to those batteries. It's not that much more money and it's worth it. If the battery's exposed to freezing temperatures, it just shuts off the charging. It lets you use the battery, but it won't let you damage the battery. That's great news. They also sell heated lithium batteries, and the ones that I recommend will actually shut the charging off and accept power from a charger or solar charge controller combo. They divert it to a heater, warms the battery up, and then turns the charge on. You know, the future is here. This is really cool stuff and it's great. It's reliable and it really works. The only thing I'm kind of picky about is I like to choose a single battery that's the right size for my needs. With heated batteries, I don't like stringing them together in parallel in series because sometimes you need better gear or one battery starts taking a charge before the other ones and they get out of balance. So if you're going with a heated battery, for now, for a beginner, just get the one you need. 200 to 280 amp hours, 50 amp hours. It's completely up to you. So this seemingly disadvantageous thing about cold temperature protection really has been solved, and you can get these things for a great price. The market is flooded and there's still content creators slinging these cheap batteries without cold temperature protection. The only application for those batteries, if you don't live in the tropics or something, is that at home, you can build out a huge battery bank and install a charge controller that does that temperature protection for you. You have control there and you can save a bunch of money on your battery bank. It's really useful. That's why those batteries exist. But on a camper, you got shore charge, solar charge, maybe DC to DC charge from your tow vehicle. It's cheaper and easier. Think of it like a seatbelt or a airbag. Get that protection built into the device. So choose the right gear here and there's no disadvantage. Almost all of the other disadvantages come from people trying to force the idea of a drop-in replacement. I hated that term. From the introduction of these nominal 12-volt LiFePO batteries, they like to be charged with different parameters. That's why there's different settings on chargers. With our campers, a lot of times the charger that we got was set up for lead acid. Nowadays, some of them have lithium options and they work well. I can show you a very easy fix that you don't have to change any gear on your camper. Now we have a cheap solution that can get the best out of these batteries. It's important to realize it's not bad for the battery. It's not bad for the charger in the short term. It just doesn't complete the charge. It brings it up to about 80%. One nice feature about quality batteries is when you bring them to 100% with a nice LiFePO charger, it balances the internal cells. It's like an oil change. It's something you really want to have done in the long term with your battery, so it's not a real drop-in. The part about the drop-in replacement that I dislike the most has to do with the alternator charging. And this will get a little bit more complicated than I want to get into in this video, but do your research. Just type in charging a lithium battery with an alternator. Your owner's manual of every reputable battery will tell you not to do this. The people that are saying it's okay is like your Uncle Buck and some guy on the forum that has no idea what he's talking about. There's a bunch of issues with doing that. Alternators only have a little bit of headroom, and even if you're getting limited current through that charging that goes through your 7-pin, there's a problem with duration. These big, low resistance lithium batteries draw more current for a much longer period of time. They make your alternator run hot and it's not good for it. You're gonna end up having to replace things or get stranded. That's a bad idea. But the bigger issue that if you're a real electrical nerd that you want to dive into is that lithium batteries have a battery management system that shut themselves off all the time. If it gets fully charged, yep, no more charge. If it gets too cold, no more charge. If it gets a blip of voltage that's too high, no more charge. This happens all the time with a lithium battery over the course of its life expectancy. While you're using it, it's gonna do that, and most of the time it's fine. If you are hooked to an unregulated alternator and it's drawing current and it shuts off immediately, it causes transients. There's almost an infinite potential of voltage. You fry diodes. Just look it up. You don't have to take my word for it, but if somebody's telling you it's fine to do, chances are they don't know what they're talking about. So you do have to get a DC to DC charge controller. It works like a crossing guard. It lets some of the charge in from the alternator, converts it to a perfect lithium profile charge. It knows when the battery is reaching full and it tampers itself down. It's good for your alternator, it's good for your battery. But if you're a cheapo like me, buying this lithium battery, they're cheap now. It's so big, I don't need to rely on my tow vehicle charge. I'll invest a little bit more in my solar. So what I do is I just disconnect the tow vehicle charge. On my trailer, there's a 7-pin plug. Each one of those pins has a wire. 4 of them are turn signals and brake lights, reverse lights. One of them's a ground, one of them goes to my brakes, and one of them charges the battery. With a multimeter, you could find this in a minute. I'll do a dedicated video, but I just remove that wire, put a little tape around it. Takes 2 minutes, and now I've fixed the alternator charging. So if you made it this far in the video, I'm gonna show you how I fixed the converter charger too and get 100% results out of this situation. So let's finish this video up with that. So I'm hanging out here enjoying my day. I don't have one with me, but I'll make it appear on the screen. I want you to get a Victron wall charger. They come in different sizes. You can get the smallest one you can find. You can get a big one if you want a faster charger. It's up to you. They come with alligator clamps and ring terminals. If you just use that charger in its default mode, it does an excellent job. But you can actually go into the settings and click Smart LiFePO, and it does a better job. And if you want to go all the way, your specific battery will give you its charging specs, and this charger allows you to change everything to match those exactly. This is how I want you to use the charger. When you're at home, clip it on the battery, plug it in, whether it's in your garage or it's in storage. It's gonna bring your lithium battery to 100% state of charge and balance the cells. So when you go out boondocking, you're gonna have 20% more runtime. It's important that your WFCO charger in your camper, no matter what kind it is it doesn't hurt the battery. It just slows down around 80% and kind of stalls out. It never balances the cells and it has trouble topping it off. Some of them, if you run them for a real long time, they climb up a little higher. 80% is pretty much what they do. Now, this little clip-on charger is only responsible for bringing it up from 80 to 100. So before I go on these trips, I clip that thing on at home. It couldn't be any easier, and it's way cheaper than changing your converter, especially if you can't do it yourself. So I will include links to the batteries that I've tested and can stand by. I hope that this video actually helps people out. You know, I know they're not the most exciting videos to watch, but I believe that if you understood these things, you could have a much better, more carefree experience in the outdoors. Leave me a comment if for some reason you actually made it to the end of this video. I thank you guys so much, and I will see you next time.